Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And today's topic is going to be all about writing, becoming an influencer, writing your first book. And with that, I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Rodney Miles, coming out of Florida. And he's going to talk to us about his early influences, his journey, how he helps authors write their first book. And it's going to be an all around great discussion around creativity and influence. So, Rodney, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited. I've heard of your podcast. It's an honor to be here.
I really love connecting with creatives such as yourself. So start off by telling the audience what you do, your kind of 1 to 2 minute backstory and how the audience can benefit from your story.
Sure. Well, I'm 54, and for the last 15 years, I've helped primarily in book production. So just to explain, the publishing process can be divided into 3 stages. The first stage I call production. The second stage is platform growth, where you have the mechanics to support your career as an author and your book sales. And then the third is publicity or promotion. I call it promotion because it's more than just a publicity campaign. It's some strategic growth strategies and so on. So I do offer a custom package that includes all three. And every package is now customized after an interview with an applicant. But for the most part of the 15 years, I've specialized in that first stage, which is the production, which is I've got organized into a 10-stage process. You're writing, editing, design, things like that. So that's where I am. I think I've been involved in over 300 books now, mainly nonfiction. I do coach some fiction authors in developing their author careers, which is a lot of fun. And but for the most part, it's been books of expertise, nonfiction, memoirs, things like that. And I've worked with some physicians too, which has been it's been a whole nother education for me.
Interesting. So, kind of starting it off, early influences, you mentioned early exposure to books like, kind of mainstream entertainment. And how did these early experiences shape your love for reading and influence your career in publishing?
That's a neat question. It goes way back. I talk about in my book how it's kind of the makings of a bibliophile, which is someone who loves books, right? I remember as a kid, my mom reading books at stoplights. She had a whole library with mainly fiction, Danielle Steele and Stephen King and a lot of the popular titles of the day, but she loved reading. As I got a little older, I think in my even preteen days, there were things I wanted to find out about that I wasn't allowed to because I wasn't old enough. But I'd find a book on the subject in my parents' house and read it, whether that was, you name it. I remember The Exorcist, the movie came out, and I wasn't allowed to go see it. I wasn't of age. And my mom had the book. So I read the book, and I realized when I finally did see the movie, I realized that book's really kind of nonfiction, believe it or not. It's written by William Peter Blatty based on all these other things that were noted that had occurred around the world and actual practices. But it was a real moment where I realized why that medium of a book is different. And I write about that in my first book on self-publishing also. And then from there, I found books as a very ready, very accessible resource for really anything you wanted to find or even speculate about. It's a medium that I don't think will ever be replaced, even though we've got the digital formats that are so popular now. It's very interesting. And then it's funny because I didn't read any of the required reading through, well, almost none, through high school or college. Well, college you did, but go back now and read some of the classics just to see what I might have missed out on. And it's kind of a matter of self-education. And that was another thing that really attracted me to books. You can cater your own journey with what you're interested in. So it gradually became a profession in a second life, so to speak, when I was about 40.
Interesting. So, yeah, so like I said, I'm a bibliophile myself, and I just kind of it's like kind of a way to find solace and just kind of because in a very distracting and loud world. So the other question is, you went to University of Florida English, and then you read series like Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. I'm not sure what that is, but how did those impact your approach to writing and editing?
That's funny. By the way, that facet that you mentioned of finding solace, I'm going to have to make a note of that because I really tried to understand why will books survive? Will print books survive? It's like will shopping malls survive? Well, they have. They've morphed. It's the high tech, high touch aspect of everything in part, but books do some very unique things. The first thing I would say is they, more than other medium, that kind of provide the visuals and the audio and a full package of sense experiences. Book, it triggers your imagination. So 10 people can read a book and visualize it 10 different ways. It's kind of stimulating and fascinating. And when you say solace, that's something I actually overlooked. That's really kind of brilliant because that really is part of the experience. It's almost out of necessity that you have to have a quiet place to, often, unless you're reading on the subway or something. But even then, so anyway, very interesting. In college, someone had recommend. I guess I had read science fiction through high school and was a fan. In college, someone recommended that series, and it might be the first fiction series that I'd ever read was the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever. And it was so good. I would read it walking across campus. Towards the end, the climax, I remember standing and pacing as I was reading that book. And I'm just not sure not everybody understands how good a book can actually be, that it can instigate you to do things like that or be preoccupied with when can I get back to my book. But it's still like that when you find a good one. So
Yeah.
it influenced me in more ways. I guess I kind of had that ancillary education going on through college. If I skipped a class or something, I was supplementing it with my own interests through books.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like your relationship with words and how you use words. It's like kind of like visualizing like an artist and like a painter, like how he or she sees colors and the different materials, or like Steven Spielberg. So one thing I really interesting is I'm always on the lookout for this trends. And so, we've seen, you mentioned print books, and then now we've gone to Kindle, and now we've got a majority of people on smartphones consuming content, short form and vertical. So, like, for example, I listen to audio because I can get 60% more information than sitting down with a book, although I love to read. So, what trends do you see in the publishing industry over the next decades? How should writers and publishers prepare for these, blogging, print, Kindle, when it's competing with like just so many different media sources?
A really good, it's a really good question, because a lot of people come to me and initially they'll make a comment like, no one's reading anymore these days or something like that. Actually, the exact opposite is true. More people are reading. Now, you mentioned words, and one of the things I emphasize, I've got one book out on self-publishing. There are at least two more coming, to maybe three, to fill out that series. And in the first book, I put a lot of emphasis on words, on the meanings of words, because a lot of these things has changed, and it plays right into your observation. That listening to an audiobook in your car or on a treadmill, I count as reading. I know a lot of us might still have that idea that it's looking at a printed page, or now it's looking at a digital device. When I was 40, I actually went back to college, which is another story. It was fabulous, by the way. If you're going to go back, if you ever thought about it, go. because you appreciate it at 40, 50, 30, unlike you did at 19, very much so. But I had this brilliant professor, Gregory Ulmer, was a professor in two different universities, and he coined a term called electracy, and suggested that we've gone from illiteracy or oral traditions to literacy, and now we're in an age of electracy, meaning how versed you are with assimilating information through digital means as well as the written words. So people are getting data more than ever. A few years ago, we turned the corner on over a million books published every year. It might even be several million now. So on the one hand, the supply might be outpacing the demand. I'll admit that, but more and more people are reading. If you use the term reading to be inclusive of audiobooks and ebooks and, different methods, it may get to where we download them. There are things coming that we simply can't see. I read a book on how to write science fiction stories once, which was excellent. One of the chapters, about 15 different authors contributed a chapter, Robert Heinlein and some well-known guys. And one of them suggested that the further out your story takes place, the more of a percentage of the technology will seem like magic to somebody today. So we can't always predict what the landscape looks like, but the trend of people learning to discern and get the information they're seeking is growing wildly, I think. And audiobooks, to answer your question about trends, you nailed it. It's audiobooks right now. It's the fastest growing segment in publishing. There are people who, I have clients all the time ask, should I do an audiobook? And the answer is yes. There are people who won't read your book unless it's available in audio. They can't. Hectic lifestyles. So you can kind of, in hindsight, it all makes sense because it's harder to find time to curl up with a book on your couch or the beach, but you can play one while you're driving or commuting or working out or whatever. So that's a known trend right now. I think the convenience and the ability. I will make one prediction just to round off this question, and then maybe I'll mention something of what people can do to prepare, and that is consider the access to books. So part of finding what you're looking for. Now that might sound like a given, but I personally think that we're going to see some things that most people wouldn't believe right now. For example, specifically with Amazon, I personally and professionally think that there's a global trend of decentralization. So we may see other platforms start to arise and gain traction that cater to specific markets rather than Amazon being the only place where a lot of people consider publishing or getting products and books from. That's an interesting trend. And what you can do right now is experiment. If you want to be an author, but you're not necessarily diving in right now, perhaps blog, keep a journal. Because I also believe you really find your voice after about 100,000 words. And that's not meant to scare anybody. That just means if you blog and you hate it, you'll better to find out now.
Yeah, really interesting. And it's like it reminds me because the other day, because I love to just browse bookstores, whatever is remaining, and like I picked up this copy of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and it's like 1,000 pages or something, and I read it like decades ago, but like that same book you could condense it in like into a movie, like an hour or 2 hours instead of spending God knows how. So in audiobooks you can actually fast forward, so it's a little bit more efficient. I'm not sure if you get as long as you're trying to get the main idea. If you really want to like immerse yourself, you can read it. So very interesting. So how can people contact you? And the other question I have for you is what do you think about AI in the writing and publishing industry? Because that's really gonna shorten time and really basically make I think basically it's like kind of like when the Gutenberg printing press is and then when we had the internet, now AI is can basically proliferate so much information and content.
Possibly. I'm a bit of a skeptic, honestly. Feel like maybe a mini Elon Musk when he warns about it. There's, it clearly. First of all, I heard someone put it this way: AI is simply a better algorithm. So it's still not living intelligence, but it's definitely a better algorithm, and the things it does are amazing, to be sure. I'm not terribly interested in AI as far as writing content. The little bit of experience I have with that is you end up spending just as much time editing what chat shot back as you would have just writing it in the first place. And part of what, although I realize AI will do this if instructed to, part of what we may lose is the authentic voice and tone of an author. Now, that might not mean too terribly much in a book of expertise, but it still does, because if you're writing your book to promote and support a speaking career, for example, I learned early on, you want to make sure that the voice in that book and the tone and your approach to ideas at least replicates what you say on stage. But clearly, AI, it's warp speed on research and on a lot of the logistical functions of putting a book together and so on. Now there are template drag and drop platforms for everything from book cover design to, of course, with AI, even researching and putting your content together. So at the same time, you can almost define a psychopath as someone without a soul, right? Without empathy, so there is that aspect of AI that I think should be approached with caution. But so far, my experience is I don't use it too terribly much. For example, if we're creating a book together, it's based on research in part. AI could assist there, but in the main, it's interviews, it's someone's personal experiences, and so on. So I guess I'm a little mixed on it still. The jury's still out as far as a holistic embracing of the technology.
Yeah. How can people contact you and follow you and reach out to you? Because I know you help people with their first books and kind of writing, publishing. There's a lot of creators out there that want to use your services. So how can they do that?
Sure. The best way is through my website, which is www.rodneymiles.com. That will always be kind of my hub, a central place to reach me. There's a contact form there. My emails are miles@rodneymiles.com, so you can email me as well.
And for all the audience, let's thank Rodney for coming on and really fantastic discussion. And be sure to give his socials a like and follow. And thanks so much for coming on.